Our planet is scorching, and as it heats, we have to face the consequences. Food shortages, the spread of diseases, and disastrous weather. To halt global warming, we need to halt adding to the atmosphere's carbon dioxide. Obviously, we have to stop emitting. But what if we did the opposite? Suck carbon dioxide out the air. These solutions aren't some magic get out of climate jail free card though. So what could they mean for the future of our planet? And do negative emissions suck? I'm Adam, a climate scientist with a PhD from Oxford, sharing what you need to know about climate change. And today let's talk about sucking up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, what climate nerds like me often call negative emissions. Oh yeah, negative emissions can save the day and cancel out all our emissions. Well, no, negative emissions are all dangerous hype and we need to stay well away from them. Well look, let's not fight here. I mean, you are both wrong. I mean, you're both a little bit right, too, so just let me explain. Literally no one is stopping you. So burning fossil fuels is emitting carbon dioxide, which is filling up in our atmosphere like water filling up a glass. The higher the level, the hotter the planet, and the harder things get for us humans. We're already seeing that today with things like devastating extreme weather, sea level rise, and the spread of diseases. Okay, so let's turn the tap off. Good idea, and that is what transitioning to lower carbon options does. Stuff like renewables, public transit, and plant-based diets all gradually turn the tap off. But we can't turn the tap off all the way. And why not? I wish you'd stop interrupting me when I'm analogizing, but that is a legit question. While it is relatively easy to decarbonize things like our power grid, there are loads of things that our societies do that are hard to do without creating greenhouse gas emissions. Industries like steel and cement manufacture, or intensive transport like flying, shipping, or trucking, or our immense farming system. There aren't easy ways to get these things to zero emissions. Okay, but what does easy mean? That's the crucial point, which we'll come back to in a bit. But first, the tap. Right, so if we can't get everything to zero emissions, that means we can't turn the tap off all the way. Exactly, and as long as the tap's still running, that means the atmosphere is still filling up, which means the world is still heating up. That is, unless we have a straw to suck some of that carbon dioxide back up. That straw is what we call negative emissions, because it's like the opposite of emissions. Okay, but obviously we can't just stick a straw in the atmosphere, so what actually are negative emissions? Well, there are a few options to suck up CO2, but they all have issues. I feel like there's one pretty obvious issue-free solution. I mean, haven't climate scientists ever heard of trees? Oh, trees. Yes, we have heard of trees. And you're right, protecting and restoring nature is great. And as much as everyone loves chatting about trees, the last IPCC report, this crucial report bringing together all our climate understanding, shouted out restoring peatlands as one of the most promising strategies for achieving nature-based carbon dioxide removal. But there are also limits to how much carbon the natural world can soak up. How quickly. Plus, there are trade-offs. More on that in a second. Okay, so what are the alternatives? Well, one alternative is still partly natural. It's called bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, or BECCS to its friends. The idea is to take a bunch of plants, burn them, or a product from them, and then capture and store the carbon dioxide that's produced. Since CO2 is absorbed when the plants grow, but captured when they're burnt, the overall result is removing carbon dioxide from that atmosphere. Negative emissions. The big benefit is that you get something useful and profitable out of it. because you're producing energy at the burning stage. Well, it's always hard to care about saving the world when it's not profitable. The plant matter for BECCS could come from waste, but a lot of climate scenarios would need a lot more than just waste products. The IPCC pathways to keep warming under 1.5 degrees C, this crucial climate limit, rely on vast amounts of land being used for BECCS crops and for new forests. In fact, a land area potentially bigger than India. And obviously we live on a finite planet. I feel like forgetting that is one of the things that's got us into this mess in the first place. Right, so using all this land for sucking up carbon dioxide would mean less land for stuff like growing food. And growing food is one of those things that we probably want to keep on doing. On top of these practical challenges, there's also the huge PR challenges behind both BECCS and nature-based negative emissions. We've seen, for both, that the benefits can get oversold or falsely accounted for, giving us a false impression of just how much they're helping. And for BECCS, it's worth pointing out that the carbon capture and storage bit isn't easy or cheap. While there are a number of advanced plants out there, we're still a long way from doing this at the huge scales that we'd need. By the way, you can do KS without the BE bit, by which I mean carbon capture and store the CO2 when burning fossil fuels. At absolute best, that would be zero emissions, not negative emissions. I've got a whole video on that and why CCS is so tough, link at the end of this video. But if you thought carbon capture and storage was tricky, wait till you meet its kooky cousin. Direct air capture. Unlike carbon capture and storage, where you catch the CO2 where it's produced, the idea of direct air capture is to, and you're never going to believe this, directly capture CO2 from the air. Of all the ideas, it's the one most like shoving a straw straight into the atmosphere to suck the CO2 out. Well, that sounds pretty cool. And it looks pretty cool too. On top of that, it uses less land than other ideas. And that's pretty much the end of the advantages. You see, out of 2,500 air molecules, just one is a carbon dioxide molecule, which makes it tough to capture those molecules. You need loads of energy, which means loads of money. Now, direct air capture plants have been built, but so far the results have been pretty meh. In total, all the plants capture around 10,000 tons of CO2 per year. That's equivalent to the emissions of just 700 US Americans. Given it's such a new technology, that's not exactly surprising, but given the challenges of ramping up, well, I wouldn't hold your breath that it'll reach the huge scales that we need. Actually, holding your breath could be a more effective way of reducing CO2 emissions. There are other negative emissions ideas too, like enhanced weathering, speeding up how rocks absorb CO2, and ocean fertilization, speeding up how the ocean absorbs CO2. But there's still loads we don't know about how effective or risky these ideas could be. While we've all got oxygen in our lungs, I just want to casually mention that this channel isn't about selling you stuff that you don't need, whether that's overhyped climate solutions or VPNs. Well, that is brilliant to know. I don't monetize my videos or do product placements. That means videos like this one are entirely supported by my amazing patrons. If you want to be amazing, click over here, but if that's not for you, just by subscribing to the channel and becoming a part of the Climate community, you're still pretty awesome. And let's get back to negative emissions. Right, so we know that any negative emissions idea is difficult and comes with trade-offs. And so taking us back to our tap, we can't just leave it blasting. We have to turn it off as much as possible, so we have to suck up as little as possible. Okay, but how much is as much as possible? Well, that is the trillion-ton question. Part of turning the tap off isn't just about switching to low carbon technologies, but also switching how we live. So, for example, flying less or eating less red meat would mean we need to suck up a lot less CO2. Also, there's some stuff that isn't impossible to decarbonize, but is difficult to decarbonize, at least with the tech we have now. Like, there are options emerging for decarbonizing steel and cement production. So how do we weigh up how hard it is to reduce those emissions against how hard it is not to reduce them, and then to have to suck them out the atmosphere? Because countries are already plotting their paths to net zero, and a lot of countries seem to be relying a lot on the idea that they can keep emitting a whole chunk and then suck up the rest. On top of that, richer countries can pay poorer countries to cancel out their emissions, which kind of feels like cheating, especially when you consider that higher income countries don't take responsibility for the emissions that countries like China create, making all our goods. So it kind of feels like wealthy nations are having their cake and eating it too. I never really understood that phrase. I mean, if you have a cake, obviously you're gonna eat it. And if you think countries are bad, wait till you meet companies. Companies are taking this to the next level with their greenwashing, putting on a green facade while still carrying on their polluting activities. There are lots of companies that are claiming they can just offset their emissions away, and this includes fossil fuel companies. In fact, if the whole oil and gas sector followed suit, they'd need an area a third the size of all farmland for these offsets, which obviously is not going to happen. But so far this video has been all about balancing out emissions, what we call net zero. But what happens after we reach net zero? Well, if we kept cutting emissions and boosting negative emissions, we could suck up more than we're emitting, and, at least in theory, undo some warming. In fact, to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees C, we'd probably need to do exactly that, because we've left cutting emissions incredibly late. Cutting emissions too little, too late seems to be a bit of a theme here. It definitely is. And yes, we do need to suck up CO2, but how much depends on how much we get our acts together to cut emissions in the first place. And given that all our options for negative emissions suck in one way or another, we really need to get our acts together and cut our emissions as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And while we're talking about climate solutions that not only suck, but might also be vital to reaching net zero, I made a whole video focusing on carbon capture and storage. Check that out over here. Okay, until next time. Bye.
Oh my god, I'm hyperhydrated.